Hey everybody, Zach Ditmars here for Fish Talk Magazine. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Live with Lenny. We got some pretty epic trophy rockfish fishing going on right now in Chesapeake Bay. And here tonight to talk about it is Mr. Lenny Rudo. Lenny, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you, Zach?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome because I had a fantastic week fishing with you out on your boat, and I've caught the 4 biggest striped bass in my entire lifetime. It was 4 over 40 on 3 trips. So, and I wasn't the only one. It was nothing short of epic. So thank you for having me aboard and putting me on those fish.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And it was indeed epic.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to mention who caught more because I think you might have.
Well, we all had our days, we all had our days, but it was pretty awesome to see everyone on board.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. I honestly, the bite right now on 40-inch plus fish, I don't think I've seen one like this since like the early to mid 2000s, maybe. I mean, it's been a long time. It really has. And thank goodness, I guess those big migrators, they just decided, hey, we're going to hang a right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and go right on up there this year. And hopefully they'll stick around. Hopefully we'll get them. We might get them right on through March. We might. I hope we do. We should.
We can only hope, but
yes,
it's been great so far. So we got a lot to talk about for winter trophy striper fishing here in the Chesapeake Bay. But before we get started, wanted to share a few other things going on. Over at fishtalkmag.com, you can click on our calendar tab. We have tons of awesome upcoming events. The CCA Pickerel Championship runs through February 29th. You can sign up anytime up until then. Fish for pickerel, bass, crappie, perch. Great fun, friendly tournament. Lenny speaking at the Pasadena Sport Group next week.
Yep, Monday at 7.
Live and in person. We got the North Beach Fire Department the following weekend. The Chesapeake Bay Boat Show. Don't miss that. Tons of boating and fishing seminars, but tons of events going on. We're going to update this as the events come in, and they usually run all the way up through March. So there's tons of awesome fishing events going on.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about when it gets really, really cold out is there's lots of stuff going on. Lots of shows, boat shows, fishing shows, lots of events. So it's cool stuff. It's a good deal.
And we're happy to be here for Live with Lenny. Thanks for everyone for tuning in thus far. And we couldn't do these events without the support of our sponsors. Now, Yamaha is our sponsor for this evening, and we're happy to have them. And my dad's been running Yamaha for 25 years. We go everywhere with complete confidence. I mean, I think he's running an 08 right now. It is tip top. Been serviced by Tri-State Marine for years, and it still purrs. It is awesome.
They built a great motor, and what's really interesting, go ahead and click on that Yamaha banner there, Zach, because this blows me away. And this page is up on our website. You can use it to find your nearest dealer. Between Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, there's like over 20 dealerships. So I don't even care where you live. If you live in our region, there's going to be Yamaha service and dealership available to you close by. And that's really nice because when something goes wrong or you need regular maintenance done, you don't want to have to drive for 2 hours to get to the nearest dealer when you're buying a new boat. And you want to deal with a dealership that's close by. It's just really nice that the coverage is so broad. That's a real advantage.
It's awesome. And you need reliable outboard to get to those fish. So
You absolutely do. And speaking of those fish, holy mackerel, are they something else? Zach, we got a little clip lined up from a video we recently did on how to catch these winter trophies. You can see it at Fish Talk's YouTube channel. But let's roll that first little clip because it's got something really important I want to talk about. And I don't want to get all preachy on everyone. I don't want to sound too preachy or anything, but this is all a catch and release fishery, and it is really critical that we treat these fish right because in the cold water, the DNR studies show a 1.6% mortality rate. That's next to nothing. Like, I've never heard of any fishery with a lower catch and release mortality rate than that. It's fantastic. So we can go out and catch fish after fish after fish, and as long as we treat them right, not worry about hurting them. But we do have to treat them right. So let's go ahead and roll that first clip.
Wow. Yeah, man.
Oh my gosh. Oh, she's biting me. Ow, ow, ow.
And the fish bit me. He bit me hard. There's actually still a little bruise on my finger where that guy got me. That was like 10 days ago. But the bottom line is, when that fish is in the water, you don't want to hoist it just by the jaw. You want to get a hand underneath the fish, just behind its belly, support it, and keep it horizontal. Because when you lift those really big fish by the jaw, you can really stress out their jaw hinge. That's one issue. And the other is it can actually do internal damage. So you really want to be gentle with them, keep them in the water. It's best not to net them. I know that when there's a big giant fish next to the boat, you want to get it in, you want to get that picture. And yeah, we netted some in the last couple of weeks. But what we've been doing is when an angler has his first giant, we're netting him with a fish safe net, right? No knotted nylon here. We're talking rubberized coated net. You can get them in that way, get your quick picture, get it over the side. And from there on out, just do it right in the water. When you saw Max there, this is one of the great things about these big fish. That fish had inhaled the jig pretty deep in its mouth. Hey, no problem. He stuck his hand right down there, pulled that jig right out. Their jaws are large enough you can actually get your hand inside and just pop the hook right out, pull it off. If you want to get that picture, again, go into the jaw with one hand, go underneath with the other hand, do a quick turn and lift, take your picture, set it back. Zach, why don't we go ahead and roll the next clip, because it's a example of just exactly what I'm talking about.
And please remember, everybody, these fish are the future of the fishery. They have an extremely low mortality rate when caught and released in this cold water, but you still need to handle them with care. Be gentle getting the hook out. Hold the fish horizontally with a hand supporting the aft end. Minimize time out of the water. Let's make sure they swim away strong to fight another day.
Yeah, I forgot to mention minimizing the time out of the water there. That's a really important thing. And what I tell folks is, hey, if you're not sure how long it's going to be and what's going on and you want to take your picture, hold your breath. The moment you pull that fish out of the water, just go, hold your breath. And when you feel like you're running out of air, you can bet that fish feels like he's running out of air, right? So then okay, get him back in the water. Get him back in. I also want to mention that article. If you just go to fishtalkmag.com and type do's and don'ts into the search box, there it is. Thank you, Zach. There's the link. Do's and don'ts of catch and release fishing. And that's not specific to the winter fish. It kind of covers all the bases. So it'll give you a really good kind of grasp and understanding of all different sorts of catch and release issues with different fish. All right. I think we are ready to get into the how-to part here. But before we do it, I want to remind everybody, we do this live because we want to hear your questions. We want to know what you want to know. So feel free to type them in the comments at any time. Zach will get them up on the screen. M.R. Johnson saying, are you crushing the barbs? That's a good point. Good point to bring up. I have not been to date. And at this point in the season, I would say, yes, it's time for me to do that because I've pulled them up to the boat. I've gotten my pictures. I've let them go. Folks who are, haven't yet caught one of these fish, I certainly wouldn't blame for not crushing the barbs. But, again, it's sort of like the netting thing, you get one or two and it's like, all right, you've broken that hurdle, right? You've done it. Now let's take every little extra measure we can to just be as super gentle on these fish as we can. And crushing the barbs is one way to do it. That's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, put in your comments, put in your suggestions. Zach will get them up on screen like you just did right there. And we'll get to it. All right. So Zach, you want to bring up the first shot here? Woo. Can we have the first? There we go.
Yeah. But I just want to note, in March, I believe it's in March, the trollers are required to smash their barbs. That is actually law.
That is accurate. And they also can't have the stinger hook, right? It's one hook per. It's
Right.
one hook per. That's a really good point. Honestly, I hadn't really dwelled on that yet, but I'll commit to it. I'll commit to it right now. Linnell's asking, is crushing the barbs mandatory on the Potomac? I'm honestly not sure.
I think it's important to just note regs where you're fishing.
Yeah. The Potomac is a different set of regs than Maryland or Virginia, and they don't even really mirror each other very well. They're really quite different. I am not sure the answer to that question. So if anybody knows, please chime in. Or we'll see how quick Zach can be on Google. He's mighty darn
I
fast.
feel like Packard told me that was in fact a law on the PRFC stuff. So.
Is that a March thing or an off-season thing?
I don't have it offhand. I'll see what I can dig up.
Okay.
All right. So I already got a lot of questions. Let's jump on them so we can keep growing.
So Robert's asking if these are ocean-run fish. Absolutely. These are not resident bay fish. These are fish that are migrating, and for whatever reason, they decided to come into the bay this year. They used to do it on a somewhat regular basis. We've seen time periods go by 5, 6, 8 years in a row where they did do it and where they didn't do it. Historically, way back when, they used to generally go down to the coast off North Carolina. Mike's saying they've been loaded with sea lice. Yeah, it's a normal thing for those migrators to head south, and sometimes they just decide to come in the bay. And I don't know that anybody really knows exactly why, other than to say that we got bait. And this year's bunker spawn, and this will go right into why I think this has contributed. This year's bunker spawn was off the charts. It was one of the best historically in memory. I believe officially the Young of the Year Index showed it the second best, but it was a tremendous bunker spawn. And as early as May, we were seeing peanut bunker, little teeny guys, in big schools out in the middle of the bay. Now, you always see the little teeny guys in the creeks and in the rivers. I don't ever remember seeing hordes of them out in the middle of the bay. Those fish are now all like 4, 4.5, 5 inches long. They had all summer and all fall to grow. So there's just way more bait than we might normally expect to find in the bay right now. MR's asking what they're feeding on. Yeah, they're feeding on these little bunker. And if you watch, it's funny. Of course, we're not, keeping these fish and gutting them, so we don't specifically see them. But if you watch the birds that are working over these big fish, every now and again, you'll see them come up with one of these bunker. They're like 4 inches long, which matches up with the Young of the Year. And like I say, the Young of the Year was just off the charts. So we've got bazillions of them. They didn't have to migrate out into the ocean, live for a while, and then swim past all the Omega boats, right? They haven't even been exposed to those boats. These are bunker that were in Maryland waters when they were this big, and a lot of them are still here. A lot of them are just south of the Virginia line. The big bunker boats have been out in the ocean. They've actually been just off the southern tip of the eastern shore. And so the ones in the Rappahannock, the ones in the James, they haven't had to make that migration back and forth past, let's say, the potential harvesting. They're just, they came in tiny and they've grown up now and they're big enough to interest these fish. So it's really very cool. Greg's saying he snagged and had a fish spitting up 5-inch bunker. That's interesting. You know what? Now that you mentioned that, we did have one bunker snag the other day. Zach, were you there for that?
It was me. I got 2 actually.
Okay, there we go.
They were about 3 inches though. They were tiny.
Huh. Well, it's Young of the Year fish. It's the fish that it's not the big, half-pound bunker. Where I haven't seen those. I haven't been seeing those really at all this year, this fall, this winter. But those little guys, they are around and they're in numbers. They're in big numbers. Pretty cool. All right. We got any more questions queued up, or you want to go ahead and throw up that slide?
Let's roll into the slides.
All right. So this is a picture of the same fish that bit my thumb, and I just couldn't quite manage to lift that guy. Anyway, I wanted to throw this picture in here because if you look to the right, you see the bait. And the fish almost dwarfs it. I mean, that actually is a Boss BKD. That's a big bait. Those guys are 10 inches. Is that right, Zach?
9.
9. Okay, big bait. Now, looking for these fish.
Yeah, they're 10. They're 10. I'm sorry.
10? Okay, 10 inches.
Sorry,
10 inches. It's a big bait. Anyway, you cut it, it's a big bait. That's on an 1.5 ounce GI head right there, which matches up with it really well. But anyway you cut it, look, a little bait will work. You will catch these fish on a little bait. But if you really want to catch the trophies and you throw the big baits, what happens is you cull out those low 20-somethings. The 30s will still eat that guy. But you cull out those 22s, those 24s, those 26s that will just pound on like a 6-inch BKD or a smaller paddle tail. And what happens is when you catch all those fish on the smaller bait, I mean, it's great. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. If you want to do it, absolutely do it. But you're spending time with fish on the line, catching those fish, taking them off, releasing them. That's all time that could be spent with a big bait in the water. So if you really want to target the big fish, use those big baits and you won't have to deal with all those smaller fish. And we have had people on my boat who have been throwing smaller stuff, and half the time it seems like they are just constantly hooked up. I'm throwing the big bait and I'm not. Number wise, I'm probably catching, 1/10, 1/20th of the number of fish that they're catching with the smaller bait. But when a fish bites, it's a big one. All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide, if you would, please. So here, this is a paddle tail. This is also a big bait. I don't think it's a 10. It might be a 8-inch. Someone else brought it aboard. I forget the name of that. It's a something sand eel. But in any case, on this particular day, that little paddle on the end of that tail, that was making a difference. I think he caught, that was actually Glenn, the president of the ASA. I think he caught more big trophy fish that day than anybody else aboard. And that paddle tail, man, that sure as heck seemed to be doing the trick. It was really working it. Now, I also want to point out that last bait you saw was chartreuse. This one's white. What I've been seeing, and this is just me on the days I've been out there, other people may find different, but pearls, whites, chartreuses have been the baits. And that even goes for the super low light conditions. We had a lot of fog earlier on here. And often in those low light foggy conditions, the dark colors do better. And for a while, I was throwing the purple glitter. And I really thought it was going to do the trick, but it just didn't. I don't know why, but it just did not do it. Savage Gear Sand Eel. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, the purple glitter just wasn't happening. And we tried it for a while. We set it down, went back to the chartreuses and the whites, and they were banging them. So, every day is different. You want to carry them all. You want to try different stuff when you're not catching. But if I was going out tomorrow, I'd be starting with either white or chartreuse. That's kind of where, where it's been at. All right, Zach, go ahead and take me to the next, if you would, please. So here we see a different tail, and this is really interesting. That's Zach right there, in case you couldn't tell. And Zach, you want to describe this bait? Because this was killing it. You were destroying him on this that day.
Sure. That's the Striper Sniper. That's the original series that Troy came out with. It's just like a 10-inch twister tail. And a buddy of mine told me he caught his personal best on one of those. So when we were out, I rigged it up on a GI with the skirt. And I think I caught every single of those 4/40 on that jig.
They were pounding on that so hard that at some point, one of my boys, Max, he switched up. Remember?
He did, and he had he had the two-tone chartreuse and dark green, and it just has you jig it, let it sink to the bottom, and work it up almost like your BKD, but it has on the fall that twister going.
And it's really interesting. A lot of these fish have been slamming it on the fall. I would say more often when you initially cast out and let it go than when you retrieve. Just sitting there in vertical jigging, I mean, you'll catch fish, don't get me wrong, but that's not the technique that I would use right now. Another interesting thing is a really hard snap is really not as interesting to these fish. They really seem to want kind of a slow jig, just more of a sweep of the rod, let it fall, sweep of the rod, let it fall. Seems to be what they're after. And I mean, hey, the water is like, the last time I was out, it was 44 degrees. So these fish are definitely slowing down a little bit. Their metabolism is, taken back a notch. And the really hard, fast snap that normally does the trick just isn't as interesting to them. They don't want to expend the energy to chase after a super active bait in this cold water. They want something that's easy to eat. And look, these are big girls. They can grab something that's easy to eat. They don't need to expend the energy. So if you're snapping it really hard and you're not catching these 40 plus inchers, you might want to think about that. Slow it down, cast it out, let it sink all the way down to the bottom, and then crank it back with just slow sweeps. Slow sweeps. All right, you want to go ahead and take us to the next? So, I can't even see without my glasses. I'm getting my glasses. You can kind of see it in this picture. This is my boys. Max is on the left. David's on the right. These fish were hooked at the same time. Very rapid retrieve. Get them in, picture, let them go. So we didn't hold a fish to take this picture. But what I wanted to point out here was if you look in between their two heads, you see some dots. Zach, go ahead and there we go. Thank you. Those are birds. All right, so how are you going to find these fish? We're going to talk about the where in just a minute. But first, let's talk about the birds. Birds are definitely the number one indicator of these fish. If you see birds working, great. If you see birds sitting on the water, slow down, stick around, putt around with your fish finder, see if the fish are there. And I'm not talking 5 birds, I'm talking 50, okay? We did find one school of big fish early last week that was under a flock of I don't know, maybe a dozen birds, if that. It wasn't under many. But most of these have been under pretty large flocks of birds. Now, interesting little tidbit, and I got no idea why this is, okay? No clue. But I have made interesting observation. It's gulls. These fish have been under gulls. There have been a lot of gannets around, but they haven't been on the fish. I don't understand why. This time of year, normally, I'm like, gannets, ooh, go there, right? But these gannets have been moving around, diving here and there, moving around. And when I saw some one of the days last week, I chased them. I was like, oh, gannets. When you find the gannets, you find the big fish. And I chased them around for, I don't know, an hour. And just, nothing happened. It was no good. And then we found gulls packed up together, got on the fish. I honestly have no idea why it is. Normally, as a rule of thumb, gannets in the wintertime are a really good sign. You want the gannets. But at least over the course of this past week, it's been gulls. These fish have been under gulls. All right, go ahead and take us to the next one if you would, Zach. I should also mention under boats. There have been a lot of boats around these birds. So Keith is saying, please explain how you should sneak up on the fish, turn off the motor, drift down to the birds as opposed to running half plane near the birds or in the birds, which kills a bite and ruins it for everybody. Well, Keith certainly has a point. These fish are relatively easily spooked. I've actually been surprised a couple times. There have been 4 or 5 boats around and they're still rolling on the surface. But if you come barreling in, you're going to knock them out. Now, here's the thing. If you can find flocks of birds working around with 4 or 5 boats, you can all cooperate and play nice and ease in on them over and over and over again. I'm going to disagree with Keith on the shutting off the motor unless you have a 2-stroke. A 2-stroke motor will absolutely spook the fish. A 4-stroke motor, I've listened to underwater with a hydrophone, the different motors and the different noises they make. A 4-stroke, a modern 4-stroke, is really very quiet. Just like above the water, the noisiest thing you hear is actually the telltale spraying onto the surface of the water. So with a 4-stroke, I'm not worried about it. 2-stroke, whole different ball of wax. Those things make a racket underwater, and it's metal on metal. It's a bad racket. What's more critical is things like slamming a hatch. You slam a fiberglass hatch, fiberglass on fiberglass, that is like a gunshot underwater. And interestingly, a really loud noise underwater is the human voice. If you're yelling to the guys on the boat 50 yards over there, that is absolutely every bit loud enough to spook the fish. Absolutely. If you pull in a big fish and everybody on board goes, woo, yay, woo. I mean, look, we all do it. I do it. virtually impossible to avoid. But that's loud enough to spook the fish. I guarantee you. You drop a hydrophone down 30 feet in the water, you will hear your own voice. It'll be like, wah, 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 wah. It sounds like the old Peanuts cartoons, the adults, where they go, wah, wah, wah. That's exactly what it sounds like. And you'll hear it all day long. Travels through the water very, very well. Herb saying, or use your Minn Kota. Herb, that would be great, except it leads me to the next thing I'm about to mention. Like I said, you got 2, 3, 4, 5 boats. Everybody can cooperate. It works great. When you get these mass packs of 15, 20 boats, somebody runs. And then everybody runs. And honestly, I have not seen it yet where it's even possible to try not to spook the fish with these large packs of boats because somebody's running for them. And if you don't run for them, guess what? You're getting there too late to catch fish. It's kind of a dilemma, but there's no easy answer to it. And the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of boats in a lot of these spots chasing fish right now. Now, best case scenario, you can get away from the pack, right? And do it on your own. And that's great. We managed to do that a couple times over the course of the last week, but what happened was within a half an hour or an hour, somebody saw us and then looked at us with binoculars and saw there were birds and said, "Ooh, birds, birds, birds." And they ran over. And before you know it, 2 boats becomes 5 boats, becomes 10 boats. So it happens. Robert's saying the gannets seem to be diving on loons this year. That's interesting. I hadn't noticed that, but I have noticed a lot of loons. I also saw a flash up real quick on the kayak. Yeah. So this is Linnell. Are you guys seeing kayakers out on the bay with the boats? The answer is I have seen one. And he caught it's one of our young guns. And he managed to catch 3 of it. Was it 3, Zach? He had 3 trophies?
Yeah.
Yeah. On his kayak. And I mean, freaking amazing. It's Mark, better known as Cha Cha. Now I want to point out, A, it was a perfect day. No wind, no waves. B, he was in a dry suit. And he knows what he's doing. He's got his safety gear in order. And if it can be done on a kayak, but if you're going to do it, first off, recognize what I just said. There are probably going to be 20, 30 boats running all over the place, right? So they're going to be boat wakes, even if there's no wind waves. And you really need your safety gear in order. And at this time of year, I'm not a kayak guy, so I'm not the best to give advice on this. But Zach, wouldn't you say that a dry suit is like an absolute necessity?
Absolutely, for big water. Okay.
That's kind of what I thought. And I know he was in one.
And he just bought that too, just to get out there this winter.
Really?
So he, it's an investment in your life,
Well, it can be pretty hectic out there. Oh, Mark's on. There's Mark. Fun time on the kayak, and it's quiet. Definitely dry suit necessary out there. Okay. And Mark, if you want to chime in with the other safety gear that you feel is necessary for this kind of thing, I mean, please do, because like I say, I'm not the kayak guy. I don't really know, but I know that's a biggie. I'm sure you got some form of communications. Honestly, it's pretty bold. It's pretty bold. But and Linnell was out on the Potomac, 4 miles out with a dry suit, PFD, and radio. That all sounds like good stuff to me.
Linnell's got it right. Yeah, I mean, personal beacon, like Alan says, also good. And a light, the 360 white light, visible up to 3 miles. Can't go wrong. Can't be too safe. And a whistle or horn. Whistle is easy because they go in your pocket.
Okay. Well, like I say, I mean, Mark he got 3 of those big ones, and it was kind of funny. Zach, you were there for this, so you know this already, but it was kind of funny because, like I say, there were 20, 30 boats. The birds would gather up here, and the whole pack would go roaring over. And Mark he'd be left back here, right? Because the kayak can't keep up with all the boats.
Well, he's the only one that wasn't putting out engine noise.
Right.
They were circling around. They were corralling the herd right to him.
And all the boats would roar over, and the birds would break up. And hopefully the first few boats got there, caught a few. And then the next thing you know, you look over your shoulder back at Mark, and he's back over here, and all the birds gathered up there again, and they're all working. And he was on the fish.
Well, his jigging technique was also impeccable. So, he was drawing them in.
It was pretty darn It was pretty darn funny. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool. And Eric's chiming in, always wear your PFD. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd have to be nuts.
We had a question earlier on that kind of pertained to our current discussion, and I flagged it to bring that back. So this is from Eric.
Boat drift techniques in regard to targeting these fish. Lots of folks recommending engine off as you drift. Thoughts? So I talked about the engine off a little bit there. 4-stroke doesn't matter a bit. Everybody does think that. That's because everybody grew up with 2 strokes. 2 strokes absolutely scare the fish to death. I would tell you, get a hydrophone or just jump over the side of the boat one day. Listen underwater. The 4-stroke just doesn't have that metal on metal noise. The 2-stroke absolutely has it. It's like bang, clang, clatter, 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 clatter. Somewhere on some computer, I still have the recordings. We recorded all these different motors. We record them at different depths, different distances behind the boat. The 4-stroke is really, honestly, it's irrelevant. But like I say, everybody grew up with a 2-stroke. The 2-stroke absolutely does make a ton of noise. And then what happens is you get a bunch of boats together. Someone's yelling. Someone slams a hatch. There's a lot of other noises that people make on the boats that absolutely will scare the fish. I mean, even just a jig head dropped on the deck, that's a sharp noise. You know, it's a really sharp, fast noise. Keith is saying 4-stroke shifting makes a bad noise. So actually, thank you, Keith, for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that. Shifting out of gear does not make a noise. Shifting into gear makes a clunk. And that absolutely does make, that's metal on metal. There is one, Yamaha, in fact. Yamaha has a shift dampening system in some of their units, which I think is like a, I don't know the technical explanation, but it removes the clunk. And that, you know, I haven't listened to that underwater, so I can't swear it eliminates the noise, but it certainly isn't metal on metal. And that tends to be the really big thing. Shifting into reverse is really bad. Like you hear that from a mile away. And I've actually watched fish spook when I've shifted into reverse. Like I've had an eyeball on them, shifted into reverse because I'm getting too close, and you just watch them go, choo. Like they know that. They absolutely know that. Yeah, so I kind of got away from the whole, I think it was Herb mentioned using the electric.
Yes.
To get up to them. The problem there is with the number of boats that are normally out there right now, you can't be fast enough. You'll never manage to get there in time when you've got those packs of boats. Now, if you're on your own, absolutely. And again, you know, it is possible to get on these fish on your own, but there's a lot of competition out there. Everybody wants to go catch these fish. So it's no wonder. And it's a great thing. I love it. But it does mean that there's, you know, a lot of boats running around. And, you know, A, you can't control what they do. And B, a lot of guys just don't really realize it. They don't realize driving, you know, right into the fish will have an effect. And so they do it. And so, you know, when you're in that kind of scenario where you've got a big pack of boats, someone's going to run. And as soon as they do, like the first 3-4 boats on the scene have a good shot. And after that, you know, kind of got to throw up your hands and go, oh, well, those fish are spooked. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find them on the meter, right? And putt around that zone where the birds were and then catch. You absolutely can. And you should be doing that. Side scan is a big help in that regard. We're going to see a little more on that in just a little bit in the slides here. Is that the next slide? I don't even remember what's next.
Yes, it is.
Oh, good. Let's go to it.
Perfect.
Yeah, bring it right up. All right, so 2 things on here I want to point out. The first is on the side scan, you can clearly see that you now, standing on the boat, want to cast to the right. This is a Humminbird Apex. That's what I'm using right now on my boat. The side scan is phenomenal, and you absolutely know when the fish are off to the right or off to the left. Now, that is one advantage. Here's another advantage. Look at that lower left box. That's my chart plotter box, zoomed in pretty tight. And I want you to look below, directly below the boat icon and slightly to the right. You can see this blue-green dot, right? That's a radar return. It's a weak radar return. It's weak because it's birds. When you see a good hard radar return, it's going to be red. It'll be red surrounded by yellow, surrounded by the blue-green. That's a boat, right? Or a boat that gives you a decent return, or perhaps a marker. Markers give you excellent returns. They're designed to. With all the fog that we have, I want at least 2 of the trips in the last 10 days, maybe 3 of them, we had really heavy fog. We also had one back in November. I had a trip with really heavy fog. We've had a lot of it this year recently. And in that heavy fog, radar gives you a serious edge on finding those birds. You need to look for the weak returns, right? And I've been asked a lot recently what range I set it on. And the answer is, I don't really set it on a range. I'll start it at like a half a mile and I'll range out, range out, range out, range out. When I get to like 2.5 miles, if I still don't see anything, I'll start ranging back in. And they'll see, this unit will see birds from farther. No question about it. The problem is, once you get outside of 2.5 miles, if you see a return from a boat that's a poor radar signature, let's say a 20-foot center console with no T-top, right? Pretty poor radar signature. At 2.5, 3 miles, that's not going to show up as a hard red. That's going to show up as a blue-green. It's going to be a weak return. And so once you get out to that range, what happens is you look at it and you go, oh, it's a weak return. I think that's birds. You go running for it. Well, then a boat appears out of the mist with no birds around it because you go running for boats. And try as I might, there have been multiple occasions one of these days where I have run to boats. I've ranged out far enough that I'm seeing a weak return and I'm like, well, it doesn't look like a boat. Let's go check it out. And well, turns out it is a boat. On closer ranges, the really weak returns, at least on my unit, are usually going to be birds. And you can also sometimes tell by the shape. It'll be a shifting shape. It'll be moving around. It won't be that, kind of button shape that you see from a boat. But really the best way that I've found to deal with this between the boats and the birds is to range out and then range back in. Range out, range back in. Now, there are going to be plenty of people sitting there right now who are going like, dang it, I don't have radar. What do I do? Here's what you do. And this has even been helpful. I'll get there 1 second, Joe, and I'll get right there. This has even been helpful when we're following birds on radar and there are a lot of boats around. It still gets confusing. Am I looking at birds? Am I looking at boats? There's 15 boats within radar range right now. What am I looking at? Listen. Stop the boat and just listen. And we've had multiple times where we've been in that scenario where there have been a lot of boats around, several with radar chasing the birds, several without, chasing the boats, chasing the birds, chasing the boats, chasing the birds. And what really did the trick was just stopping and listening. Okay, the birds are that way. Well, you don't obviously you don't need radar to do that. And that can tip you off as to which direction they're in. In the fog, particularly on the really calm days in the fog, it's shocking how far you can hear them from. I don't want to put a number on it because I'm honestly not sure, but I've been surprised more than once, and heard them that way and then gone to them and holy cow, there are the birds. All right. I put that comment off because I wanted to finish that thought. What was it? Open array or dome? Okay. So Joe, I'm using a dome radar. It's a Humminbird. It's the one that matches up with the Apex. Modern domes are very, 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 very different than the domes that were made 5, 8, 10, 15 years ago. They're solid state units. All of them, I shouldn't say that. I think all of them are at this point, but most of them aren't. They're solid state units. They don't have a magnetron, right? With the old magnetron radars, the traditional radars, having an open array was really important. You needed that narrow bandwidth and that hard punch to see birds. These modern domes don't have a magnetron. They claim the amount of energy that you get with your cell phone next to your head. It's supposed to be very low energy. You don't have to worry about baking people. And rather than timing the return of a pulse with the magnetron, right? That's historically how it works. Magnetron puts out a pulse, it hits something, the return comes back, it calculates the time to calculate the distance. Instead, these calculate frequency. They send out a frequency that gets wider and wider and wider. It hits the return, it comes back. And then the unit calculates the distance via the difference in frequency. They are shockingly good at picking up birds. You can have a single bird fly by 100 yards off the boat sometimes, glance at your screen, and there's blip, there it is, and then it's gone. And you're like, holy cow, is that bird? Except it happens over and over and over again. The modern ones are really good. Jonathan saying Humminbird made radar now, had no idea. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at my boat, you'll see the Humminbird on the dome. But again, it's the solid state units. That's the key. It's not a magnetron pulse unit. If you took a 10-year-old dome, I think it was about 10 years ago, this transition began. Lowrance did it first with the broadband, and I'm not sure the progression, but one after the next, everybody kind of picked up on it and switched over. If you took one of those older ones, one of the magnetron domes, and tried to look for birds, it's a fool's errand. Not going to work. Now, if you have a big open array, a modern one, still, that's great. But you can use these units to find birds, no problem. No problem at all. I can't even tell you how many times we use that dome to get on birds in the last couple of weeks. It's pretty phenomenal. Dwayne is saying on the Yamaha 4-stroke 2-shift dampener system, the SDS, right, reduces the clunk sound that often occurs with shifting with outboard engines. By reducing this noise, the SDS contributes to a quieter, smoother, and more comfortable boating experience. I'm sure that's absolutely accurate. I hate that shift. I hate that clunk. It's something you kind of got to put up with. And like I mentioned earlier, I believe that is the only system around that actually, quiets that clunk down. I wish I knew the specific technical way they accomplish it. I want to say it's some kind of rubber in the hub, or I just don't know, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but you can. I have been on boats with it, and you absolutely can tell the difference. That hard thump is just, it's not there. Kevin's chiming in here. Modern day radars are solid state amplifiers and use pulse compression techniques to improve the signal to noise ratio, which improves sensitivity. Yeah, they're fantastic. They're miles away from yesterday's dome radars. They really are. And most of the open arrays these days actually are dual units. They do both. Or I shouldn't say most, I haven't looked, but many. There are many dual units now that do both. They use the magnetron for the long range, because once you get out to 30, 40 miles, these solid state units kind of lose their punch. They don't. Again, I hate to be wrong. I could be wrong, but I don't believe they make any with more than like a 40-mile range. And certainly once they get many miles out, they lose their punch. You want to have the magnetron on there. And like I said, nowadays the big ones often are combo units. They've got both. They can do it both ways. But of course, with a radar, height is your limiting factor on range. And unless you're on a 60-footer, you're not going to see 30, 40 miles anyway. All right. Kevin is saying Eric just points to the water and fish jump in the boat. Kevin, evidently you fished with Eric before. All right, should we get the next slide up, Zach? I think we're going to the Where To now, right? Yes, the Where To. So this is. I hope this doesn't disappoint people, because this is going to be very broad. But if you look at the big red line I drew around basically everywhere from just west of the south side of Poplar Island, clear down to south of Sharps Island Light. That's the area I've been fishing. Honestly, it's just because the area that's close to home for me, and the fish have been there. Now, we have also been getting reports from Bloody Point. When I prepped the slides for today, I didn't include one for that because that was a few days ago, and I hadn't really heard about big fish there. Now, recently, we have gotten some reports of big fish off Bloody Point. Most of what I had been hearing was 30 somethings as opposed to 40 somethings. That may be beginning to change. So add bloody point on here as well. But here's the thing. Zach, go ahead and take us to the next slide if you would. Here's off the mouth of the Patuxent. Same deal. They're through this stretch. Go ahead to the next slide, please. We got it in the Potomac and in the bay right off of the Potomac. Same deal. Zach, go ahead, please. In the mouth of the Rappahannock from the bridge clear on down to the mouth. Next slide, please. And at the CBBT. These fish are pretty much everywhere. And of course, day to day, the hot spot's going to change, right? They got tails, they're going to swim. But all those spots we just put up on there, they have all been coming up over and over again in photo verified reports, reports that our reports editor Dylan is gathering. You name it. You name it. They're coming up over and over again. Patrick saying, just sharing a hot spot for people from land. The Key Bridge in Georgetown is nice. There's a good path under the bridge, big stripers. Interesting. That's a new one to me. Jonathan saying Rappahannock and Cut Channel have been good. We've been getting a ton of reports from the Rap. The Rap has definitely been a really good hotspot. One thing that Jonathan, maybe you have insight on this. Maybe it's just locality. One thing I've been surprised at is a lot of the reports from the Rappahannock have come from trollers, whereas most of the Middle Bay zone, we're hearing from jiggers. There's been an occasional troller, and the guys that are doing it are picking them up. But we've gotten lots of reports from the Rap of guys trolling umbrellas and tandem rigs. Bill, hey, Bill. Long time no see. Bill saying the Rap is on fire. Yep, it's a happening. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a thing about, a difference in location as to how the fish are hitting, as to why the trollers are doing so good there, or if there are just more guys who troll the Rap as opposed to jigging. I don't know. But for whatever reason, that's been a regular thing in the reports, regular item. So it's very interesting. Very interesting. Mike's saying when not chasing birds, are you fishing structure or bottom? Nope. These fish are not holding on structure. They are chasing bait. They're following the bait fish. And if the bait fish are moving, they're moving. And if the bait fish leave, they're going to leave. They're not holding on any type of structure whatsoever. I forgot to mention earlier, it's been mostly 45 to 55 feet of water, with the bulk of the bites coming when you work that jig through about 25, 35 feet down. We have seen them move as shallow as 30, 32 feet of water. And actually, when Zach was on board for it, we had just the magic moment where it was just everybody on board hooked up to 40-inch plus fish. That was in I think 32 feet. It was shallow. Remember, we had moved shallower.
It's 30.
30. Yeah. It was shallow. That was about the shallowest I've seen these fish. But again, they're chasing bait. That's what's happening.
Away from the pack, too.
Yes, it was. Yes. And it was magic. I mean, they were rolling on top for quite a while. Remember, some boats did eventually arrive. They did get there. I think we had 4 or 5. But those fish stayed up top. Here's another wacky one. And I have zero clue as to why this is. I can't figure it out. As soon as, everybody caught some fish and we're like, it'd be really cool, topwater, right? So we grabbed topwater plugs and we started throwing topwater to get these fish are rolling up top. You're looking at them rolling. You can see they're these big giant rockfish. We could not get them to hit topwater. And I've not heard from anybody who did. So if anybody out there has managed to get them to hit topwater, please chime in. Let us know what you were doing and how you did it, because we tried chuggers fast and slow. We tried walking the dog fast and slow. All kinds of stuff. Pencil poppers. Could not get them to strike topwater. No idea why. So I'd be really curious to hear if anybody out there has managed to get them on topwater. I really wanted to see that explosion. And I tried for quite a while. Max tried for quite a while. They just wouldn't do it. Don't know why. We also did see them follow the popper up to the boat, but they wouldn't touch it. Adam saying it's a great idea to replace trebles with singles for anyone using lures, safer for the fish and the fishermen. Adam, good gravy. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, you just absolutely, positively should not be throwing anything with trebles right now. Now, the jigs are all single hooks, of course. And, the tandems, the umbrellas are all single hooks. The top water, a lot of top water is treble hooks. And honestly, you got no business throwing that lure if you haven't switched that treble out for a single. These are not fish that are going in the box ever. There's absolutely no reason to throw the treble. And the truth of the matter is, I've switched mine over at this point going way back. I don't think you lose that many fish. I mean, you might miss a few more strikes, but you miss a lot of topwater strikes in the first place. Trebles are not. So absolutely. I think I got one right here. I sure do. Singles, single hooks. And remember, if when you bought the lure, it had the trebles, you got the split ring right there. Just open it up, slide that treble hook off, put a single hook on.
Why don't you throw that big one back there?
Which one? The ginormous one? Those got trebles. There's Ian. Ian saying some people are getting them on topwater, but it seems the majority of topwater fish are hitting a jig the second it hits a surf. Ian, we've had that happen too. Absolutely. We've had them hit a jig, like splash down, boom, you're on, but have not seen it on the topwater lure. So actually, I believe Ian made this lure.
Oh,
I have proof positive this is one of his lures because it's got the VKD on it.
absolutely.
He gave me one of these with the singles. Thank you, Ian, for putting on the singles. Eric's saying some have been eating right at the boat as you speed up the bait to pull it out of the water. Interesting. That's I can't remember any specific that happened to me, but that's interesting. And I remember Eric mentioning he got into them big time yesterday. And Eric, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you also mentioned it was not on the snap jig. It was on the slow sweepy jig, right? Tom saying you saw an over 40 and a bait pile eating bait at the surface. Yeah, these fish have been coming up and rolling. Just it's an amazing sight. Total National Geo stuff. The question's coming up. Do you use any Procure scent? I do not. I'm a big hater on the scent goo because I have kids, and when they were younger, I had to ban the stuff from my boat because it ended up on my seat and in my hair and on my clothes and, on the kid's face. It just is not a good thing with kids, right? Now, since then, I should have come around. Zach brings it. Zach uses it. Absolutely catches with it. A lot of guys, knowledgeable guys, absolutely 100% believe in it. Zach, you want to chime in on this? Because you do use it.
Sure, I think it's great. It doesn't hurt. If you get a bite, sometimes they, might circle back, bite again.
I was convinced enough watching you in some situations fishing side by side with me that I actually got a thing of it, remember?
Yeah, you got the oil. You got to get the gel. The oil is a mess. So then once again, you're your own worst enemy because you're making them. I grabbed it and started forgetting, don't get that on my gel coat. And it's like, well, that's not.
I got the wrong.
I thought
I
it was like
stuff.
baking in the sun. It was hot. So, but Dave,
I got the wrong. I just didn't know because I hadn't bought the stuff in 15 years. So I got the wrong stuff.
The one day we're out and your son David had the hot hand, and I did see him squirt some of that on his jig. So I don't.
The oil or the goo?
The oil.
Yeah, he was holding it over the side and squirting, right?
I don't remember if that was the day he caught the most or if he was doing that out of desperation as his twin brother was out fishing him. I'm not really sure.
It's funny too because we had one day where he caught 4 trophies aboard, and it was all 4 trophies that were caught aboard the boat that day. He caught them all. And then we had another day where his brother was putting him to shame. Everybody else was. And he was like, what's going on? It was pretty funny. He was back and forth.
Yeah. Well, couple questions I think that I flagged that I wanted to circle back to. So let me hide and bring them up.
All right, let's bring them on. Does what we're seeing bode well for a bounce back for the population? Okay, so Tim, the sad answer is no. We are not seeing new fish here. What we're seeing is fish that migrate up the coast, the main body of these big breeders that normally, or not normally, but most years when you look back historically, they don't choose to come in the bay. They've done it before. right? And they've done it for stretches of years at a time before, but they've been absent for many, many years at a time. And certainly in recent years, they haven't come in the bay. Like I was saying before, they used to go down to North Carolina. They'd winter off Virginia Beach in the ocean. That's those fish. Okay. These aren't new fish. We have a real concentration of them here right now, but it doesn't change the stock assessment. It doesn't change the total number of breeding stock that's out there. Now, that said, there are plenty of these fish to make a huge batch of new baby fish. When we had the moratorium, it wasn't this slow build to get back to a decent stock. We had a year where they had a really good spawn. There weren't many big breeders making that spawn, but a few fish can make a really big, good spawn. What we need is a good spawn. We've just had 5 years in a row of these terrible spawns. We need the right conditions. I don't know what we need, okay? Because now you get into a whole conversation about blue cats and snakeheads and water quality and all kinds of stuff. But the bottom line is, we have the stock we need to make a big batch of babies. It just hasn't been happening. And these big fish didn't just grow up or appear here. This is the same big stock of breeders that's been up the coast, coming down and swinging in. Mike is saying, could these ocean fish wintering over potentially lead to a bigger, better spawn? I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I'm pretty confident here in saying that it's not really relevant where they are. What's really relevant is the conditions when they spawn. And what the scientists say is we need winter snow melt off. We need high water levels without like a mud, raging mud rivers. And that's what gets them going. There's been a lot of talk about these copepods that bloom at a certain stage when you get this cold water runoff. And what they say is we need the spawn to coincide with that. So the little baby mini rockfish have plenty to eat. These little winter copepods are what they eat, or spring copepods is what they feed on at first. But again, after you have that conversation, you get into the conversation about, hey, are all these gazillions of blue cats just eating all the babies? Hey, is the water quality so bad that the babies aren't surviving? There's a whole lot more unanswered questions that I'm pretty sure not even the scientists know the answer to. There's a whole lot of theories, not a whole lot of hard we know facts. But again, there is a sufficient stock of breeding fish. They're out there right now, these very fish, for us to have a tremendous spawn if we get the right conditions. If you look at the Young of the Year index right after the moratorium, you see these piddly spawns, and then there's like a boom off the charts. And over the course of the next 20 years, you see 3 or 4 of those. They're just boom off the chart spawns. And you got tons and tons and tons of rockfish as a result. But then you get these low years. And right now, we don't just have low years, we got no years. It's been bad. Hey, Fred saying, I didn't see a net at all. You're not using a net for the big fish. So I think I mentioned earlier, like for the first few we did, if somebody is new aboard, they haven't caught one of these big giant fish yet, we'll use a net to land it, to get them their picture. It's not bad as long as you're using a proper net, a catch and release net, one that does not have knotted nylon, but instead has that rubberized coating on it. God, if you use a knotted nylon net on these fish, I'd just like to smack it. It's like, don't do that. Okay. Just don't do that. That is bad, bad, bad. But if you got the right kind of release net, yeah, absolutely, you can net them. But just as an added measure, of precaution, after you've caught a fish or two like that, taken a picture or two, why net it? Why even risk it? Why not just take that hook out of the fish in the water, get your hands in the proper positions, give a quick lift, quick pick, drop it right back in, right? Best way to do it.
All right, Lenny, we're at the final hour. Do you have anything else to say? I have one more question for you.
Go ahead and put it up, man. I think we've ran through the slides. We've run through the whole deal. Patrick saying, out of the trophy size fish, which one puts up the best fight? Cobia, blues, bulls, or rockfish? I'm saying hands down cobia. That's just me. Other people might have other opinions. Some people are going to say bulls. But man, cobia, they can kick your butt. And what's worse, you get them in the boat and then they fight harder.
Tyler Nunn told me they'll rip your arms off. He's a big cobia guy.
I've had more boat damage from cobia than I have from any other fish. Tuna? No. I anything.
Your old boat ship's deck had cobia scars all over it.
It did. A cobia busted out the undergunnel rod holders, bent a net at a 90-degree angle, and made cobia have made multiple people aboard my boat bleed when no one has any idea why. It's like you get the cobia into the boat, you manage to subdue it, you get it in the box, and then somebody looks down and goes, "Oh man, I'm bleeding." Yeah,
I saw this post up in. Someone found a carcass up the Delaware Bay, way up the river, Delaware River, and it looked like a cobia to me. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's a muskie." And I said, I think I'm pretty sure it's cobia. I'm gonna get one this year. We'll get a cobia this year.
Let's do it. We haven't had the greatest cobia seasons the last couple of years. There've been little spurts and fits of them, but not like it was 5 years ago. At least in this neck of the woods.
Matthew said he tore a tendon in his elbow.
Matthew, you're not alone.
But Grant said if you had a 50-pound bluefish, I don't know.
That's kind of tough to argue with.
Never seen a 50-pound.
That's kind of tough. And the bluefish will intentionally attack you and hurt you. I've had that happen where they have been in the water next to the boat, jumped out of the boat, latch down on my hand, shake their head, and then get back in the water. I spent like a month in bandages over that. That was like a 15, 18-pound bluefish.
Awesome. Well, awesome presentation, Lenny. I think everyone enjoyed it. Great engagement. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Awesome questions, awesome commentary.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Yamaha, for bringing us tonight's event. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And don't forget, tomorrow by noon, fishtalkmag.com fishing reports. Y'all have a great weekend. Be safe out there.